You are able to see the slides?
Yes. Do you want to do the full screen?
Let me see.
Can you please let Siddharth Aryan in? We need to bump him as a panelist. He's now, I can see him as one of the attendees in the waiting room.
Bhuvan can also give him mic.
I'm promoting Sid as a panelist.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Alok, I'm trying, but I'm not able to promote Sid as a panelist. Can you?
अभी किसको promote करना है sir?
Sid को. Okay. So,
Siddharth Aryan.
Siddharth Aryan. Okay. Now he's a panelist list. Can you check it?
yeah.
He's just checking in.
Hi sir.
A couple of more minutes. We'll let people join in and then we'll start.
A pleasure to welcome everyone for today's session on India's carbon market framework, which is jointly hosted by USISPF and Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. Before we begin, I would like to mention some housekeeping rules. Please keep yourselves on mute, and if there are any questions, you may raise your hand or post it in the chat box that can be taken up during the Q&A round. As India prepares the carbon trading framework, today's session will discuss the various aspects of the Energy Conservation Bill and BEE's blueprint on national carbon market. The session will be divided into two parts, a presentation by Cam, followed by an interactive discussion and Q&A. Further, as next steps to this session, we will plan to collate inputs from the participants, including energy consumers and project developers, and plan consultations with BEE and MOP. We'll keep you all updated. Please email us after the session if you're interested to join those interactions and understand more. Well, without further ado, I would like to call on my colleague from CAM, Ramanuj Kumar, who's partner for infrastructure projects. Over to you, Ramanuj.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to have you all, and thank you for joining in this session on national carbon market. Without much ado, I will sort of start with a sort of brief context in terms of what has happened in the creation of national carbon market so far with the legislative intervention, and then I'll touch upon the Bureau of Energy Efficiency Blueprint, which was released even before the legislation was stable in the Parliament. And thereafter, we'll just pick up some issues which are highlighted in the BE blueprint, as well as some of the debates that happened in Parliament while the legislation was being piloted through by the Energy Minister, and what could be the sort of potential challenges in creating the national carbon market in India. And then sort of we can take up the questions from the participants. So thank you very much. As many of you would be aware that Energy Conservation Amendment Bill was introduced in Lok Sabha on 29 July 2022. It was passed by Lok Sabha in August and then finally passed by Rajya Sabha in December 2022. And now the Amendment Act has been notified on January 4, 2023. So the Energy Conservation Act is now formally amended. Now, paragraph 3 of this statement of objects and regions of this legislation says, in the context of energy transition, with special focus on promotion of new and renewable energy and national clean hydrogen mission, a need has arisen to further amend the said act to promote renewable energy and development of domestic carbon market, to battle climate change, and introduce new concepts such as carbon trading and mandate use of non-fossil fuel sources to ensure faster decarbonization of Indian economy. So from this, it's very clear that the stated legislative intent or objective is to develop domestic carbon market and carbon trading to battle climate change. Now, operative provision in the legislation is section 14AA. Section 14AA, subclause 1 of the Act, which empowers the central government or any other authorized agency.
Ramanuj, 1 second. This is Bose. Could you go on full presentation mode so the screen is legible for people? Bose here. Sorry.
Yes. You're saying it's not visible, Bose?
I think if you go presentation mode, I think it'll come full screen, so it'll be more legible for people. So now 2 screens are showing. On your PowerPoint, I think there's a presentation mode. If you go, you get full screen view of the slide. Yeah.
This is better.
Yeah, this is good.
Okay, thank you. So operative provision says that the section 14A, it empowers the central government or any other authorized agency in this behalf to issue carbon credits, carbon credit certificate to the registered entity which complies with the requirements of the carbon trading scheme. Now, this carbon trading scheme or the rules governing it is yet to be formulated or notified, and possibly we'll have to sort of reserve our views and judgment on what this scheme could entail. But we get some idea in terms of what the government's thinking could be in this direction, and this is where the draft blueprint for national carbon market released by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency comes in. Now, some of you who may not be familiar with the Indian administrative setup, Bureau of Energy Efficiency is a body functioning under the Ministry of Power, which was created in 2001 under the Energy Conservation Act to administer energy efficiency programs in the country. And under the Energy Conservation Act, the energy efficiency programs were monitored and implemented under a scheme called Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme. Now, Perform, Achieve and Trade, or in short form PAT, this was designed to encourage and promote energy efficiency in various energy intensive industries and establishments, which as of now covers 13 sectors or establishments. And under the PAT scheme, the BEE issued what was called energy saving certificates. So essentially, similar to what would happen in a carbon trading or an emission trading system, there were certain energy efficiency targets set for some of the specified industries. And those who overachieved, they were given credits, and those who underachieved, they were potentially liable for penalties under the act. And those who overachieved, that is how the energy saving certificates got generated, which could be traded in the market. So we'll have a little more on that in terms of how that energy saving certificates fits into the sort of debate on national carbon market in just a moment. So under the BE blueprint, it talks about creating and implementing the carbon market in 3 phases: phase 1 short term, phase 2 medium term, and phase 3 long term. Phase 1, what it contemplates is essentially developing a voluntary carbon market to support achievement of NDC, that is India's nationally determined contributions to fight climate change and submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention, to enable and spur demand for unutilized energy saving certificates issued under the PAT program, under the Energy Conservation Act. Now, what it contemplates is conversion of e-certs and RECs, which are renewable energy credits, to Indian carbon credits, and SBTI, that is science-based, those Indian companies which have submitted science-based target based reduction in emissions, or CDP compliant companies would be able to participate in this voluntary carbon market, in addition to those designated consumers which are already covered under the PAT. In the medium term, it contemplates increased supply in the voluntary carbon market by introducing project level registration, validation by a third party auditor, and verification and issue of emission reduction units or carbon credits. Now, even until phase 2, now there are no indication when this phase 1 and phase 2 would be, let's say in terms of timelines, when it would be implemented or completed. But up to phase 2, the emphasis is on developing and implementing a voluntary carbon market. And then phase 3, which is long term, possibly 4 to 5 years from here on, is where there is a proposal to move towards a cap and trade system, wherein sector specific or sector and entity specific emission targets will be set, and typical allowances may be issued, and then those who overachieve will get credits, and those who underachieve from their targets, they will be subjected to penalties, and there are provisions for penalty which has been introduced in the Amendment Act. Now, that's just a very quick overview and summary of what the blueprint, draft blueprint contemplates. Now, just a sort of quick appraisal of what how this blueprint would achieve and what it would achieve in creating a national carbon market. So, foundational principle, as we know, foundational principle of a carbon market or carbon trading scheme is that the polluter pays principle. Now, polluter pays principle, as a concept, has long been established in Indian environmental jurisprudence by the Indian Supreme Court for a long time, almost more than it was started in the 1980s, and now it's a quite a established concept, though it has not necessarily translated into a carbon tax or carbon trading scheme as such. Now, Indian focus is on the creation of voluntary carbon market as opposed to the compliance market, where the targets would be set, and which is blueprint contemplates that would be done in the long term. The act itself doesn't give any idea in terms of when a cap and trade system or a compliance market would be established. Though I'll come to what has been sort of stated by the energy minister in the parliament when the bill was being discussed. Now, in terms of some of the challenges which the BE blueprint, if it were to be implemented, that could be faced. So the proposal to introduce fungibility of ESOTs and RECs with carbon credits. Now, this could be quite challenging because ESOTs and RECs, they have not been issued under any globally accredited process, and therefore even for Indian companies who have committed or who have announced net zero targets or SBTi based emission reduction targets, they may find it difficult that their global investors they may not sort of necessarily approve this ESOTs and RECs, which is converted into Indian carbon credits, because these are not necessarily properly verified emission reduction instruments. So far, the data suggests, at least for those companies which have committed to net zero or SBTi-based targets, that they have till date preferred direct purchase of renewable energy as compared to purchase of carbon credits. Now, this could change over time, but this is sort of current state of affairs. The BE study anticipates, based on some preliminary market survey, that 50% of the emission reduction obligation could be met by purchase of renewable energy, and balance 50% could be met by purchase of carbon credits in the voluntary market. But as per a CDP annual report for 2021, only 9% of the respondents prefer to purchase any green energy attributes or energy attribute certificates or credits. Another sort of feature of the draft BE blueprint is that it anticipates that discoms with RPO obligation would become a major demand creator in the voluntary carbon market. However, we'll just come to that, what's been the track record of compliance with the RPO, RPO enforcement and track record of compliance of the discoms in that area, and whether this could become a meaningful demand creator. Now, probably in terms of what are the challenges in what BE has proposed, it seems currently quite challenging, because India's overarching objective is to achieve its nationally determined contribution submitted to the UNFCCC. Now, initial proposal, or at least in the short term, to convert ESOTs and RECs, which are renewable energy credits issued pursuant by renewable energy companies under the CERC framework, they have not had a great record due to poor RPO enforcement and oversupply of ESOTs and limited trading period in the market. Now, just to give a little more sort of color to this, that ESOTs only in the phase one of the PAT program, there were roughly 2.59 million units of ESOTs which were surplus, which had not been traded. And phase two, this number has only added and swelled over 4 or 5 million perhaps. Now, obviously, Indian policymakers and BE wanted, or they are looking to utilize these ESOTs which have been generated and convert them into some form of carbon credit so that they could be utilized meaningfully and help develop a market for at least in the voluntary space. But as I said, because of lack of proper internationally acceptable verification and monitoring method, these may not find acceptance among large companies which are a global investor or lender base to see that they are meaningfully engaging in a emission reduction program. Now, instead of seeking to utilize ESOTs and RECs, India could perhaps look at establishing a fresh market architecture for carbon trading. Now, this architecture sort of could include, for example, the following, which is identification of high emission industries and sectors and progressive inclusion of new sectors, industries. Now, some baseline is already available in this regard, because there are 13 sectors which are already part of the PAT scheme, And out of those 13, perhaps 6 or 7 high emission industries or sectors could become the starting point for designing a new national carbon market. Then the next would be a preparation of a business as usual GHG emission scenario, taking into account projected growth in the industry or sector. Then establishing or tying up with other agencies, including international agencies, to validate, monitor, and verify GHG emission reductions. Then publishing a 5-year or a sort of 10-year trajectory for emission reduction for specified sectors, industries. And more importantly, removing of the RPO target for such industry sectors, because remember that there are already RPO, renewable purchase obligations, on the DISCOMs and also on the captive power purchasers. Now, DISCOMs have had very poor track record in meeting their RPO obligation, and part of this reason has been that enforcement has been very weak. So, as many of you know, that the RPO obligation enforcement is in the hands of what's called state electricity regulatory commissions created under the Electricity Act. Now, in many states, there are large accumulated RPO targets which have been carried over from year to year. And if for example, if BE blueprint, as it sort of contemplates, if DISCOMs were to be treated as a sort of key driver of demand in the voluntary carbon market, then given what we have seen in the RPO compliance market, it seems difficult that the DISCOMs would behave any differently in the voluntary carbon market, and would become a serious demand driver for the voluntary carbon credits. Now, then the next step should be to sort of enable voluntary trading for first sort of initial short term, maybe 2-3 years, and use this period to prepare to launch a full-fledged compliance-based market towards a meaningful and true cap and trade system. Now, if we see from the experience of other global markets, it is actually the cap and trade system which is being sort of resulted in a meaningful reduction of emissions. Now, India, of course, driving its commitments under the UNFCCC framework and under the Paris Agreement under Article 6.4, which doesn't sort of make it obligatory to launch a cap and trade system. But I mean, we would think that if there is to be a meaningful and serious attempt at creating a national carbon market, then it has to move to a properly verifiable and monitorable cap and trade system, which takes into account India's development trajectory, its BAU emission scenario, and whether trading of carbon credits would drive meaningful emission reductions, and what would be sort of cost benefit analysis for the industries involved. Because simply sort of focusing on the voluntary carbon market may not sort of necessarily yield the desired result. Now, just sort of I'm pausing here for a moment. Now, while BE blueprint talks about creating a voluntary carbon market, and the Energy Conservation Amendment Act itself does not say that whether it will be a voluntary market or a compliance market, or where certain mandates would be created by the government on specified industries. But if we look at the statements made by the Energy Minister in both houses of Parliament while he was discussing the bill, he has very clearly indicated that there will be some kind of mandates or obligations on specified sectors or industries. Now, that would seem to indicate that the thinking in the government may have evolved, and they may be looking to launch a cap and trade system or a compliance market sooner, rather than waiting for a longer term. Now, another feature which has come in sort of recent news reports, and this is not necessarily part of the act, but this could become part of the proposed carbon trading scheme, is India's proposal to create a stabilization fund or a sort of market stability reserve on the lines of what's been done in the EU to support one, liquidity in the market, and also to provide a floor price for the carbon credit, so that stabilization fund could be used to support prices not going below a certain floor, so that it encourages investors to take the carbon trading market seriously. Now, if we look at what's been sort of experienced in other countries, I think gradually it would also make sense, though Indian policymakers are usually reluctant to go into this arena, is to allow and introduce futures trading in this space. This would sort of enable and provide liquidity to the market, and also sort of enable financialization of the carbon market, which would attract sort of more investors as well as greater number of participants, and that would create a truly deep market. Now, some of you would have sort of I anticipate that some of you may have questions on what happens to the whether India is going to touch the exports, or what would be the regime regarding export of carbon market. So I have my colleague Bose Varghese, who will take up the next session of the session, and once he has finished, then maybe we can come back to the export issue. So Bose, over to you.
Thank you, Ramanuj. Hello, everyone. So I am going to give a quick overview of the voluntary carbon market, globally, as well as in India, and some of the key evolving trends. So here is a chart or a table that shows you the voluntary carbon market, the type of projects and the volumes and prices for 20 and 21. What has happened in this market? Voluntary market, by definition, is driven by voluntary commitments, and that has something to do with this trend. Pre-COVID, this whole carbon market is almost non-existent. After the Kyoto Protocol in 2008, 10, 11, the carbon market died off pretty much. And pre-COVID itself, the volumes were really low. The prices were also really low. And then something happened. In 2020, 2021, we have seen such a huge rally in behind net zero globally by corporates. And that really pumped up the market. And you can see 2021 from almost nothing to, there are two takeaways from here: how the prices have firmed up and how the total trading has firmed up. 2021 closed with almost $2 billion in global voluntary market. And, prices, of course, prices varies for different types of credits, with renewable energy credits being one of the cheapest, and credits with a lot of co-benefits and tracking to SDGs, they command a better price. So this gives you, how things have moved in the last 2 years globally. Can we move to the next slide, please? So in India, India traditionally, even under the Kyoto Protocol, India was a big supply market. For the voluntary market, it continues to be a supply market. And the demand is obviously coming from Europe and North America by large corporations who have taken net zero commitment, and some of them carbon neutral commitments. And in India, during Kyoto Protocol, it was mostly renewable energy based projects that dominated the space. Today, there are a lot of community based projects, the types of biogas and other cook stoves and that kind of projects, with a big leaning on SDGs, apart from achieving emission reduction. And renewable energy, there are a lot of legacy projects under CDM, registered projects, there are a lot of surplus carbon credits sitting with a lot of players. Looks like the market has some limited appetite, depending on type of projects and some other features. All the prices are really low. Given all this, the volumes are pretty low compared to the Kyoto time, and prices are just firming up. In fact, prices were just firming up in the last 3-4 months. I hear from large exchanges that the prices have taken a hit. It's a reflection of slowing down in Europe and in North America, and the after effects of the war. In the Indian market, two outstanding concerns for those who are trying to procure offsets from the Indian market. One, Ramanuj already touched upon. There is a fear of an export ban. In fact, there was a statement from the government at some point, but I think it was kind of explained away that the government didn't really mean it. So that's up in the air, but deals are happening. The other potential risk along the way is a possible GST. Today, carbon credits don't attract any taxation in India, it's possible the way carbon credits are looked at in the books and being accounted in the books could be different, and there could be some taxation. Can we go to the next slide, please? So carbon registries, these are the main registries in India. The gold standard registry is very active under Apex Inc. The Vera VCS registry is very active. Then there are other registries, Plan Vivo, others have probably smaller presence in India, but the registries and their number of projects and volume of credits, they vary across geographies. In India, gold standard and VCS are dominant. Can we move to the next one, please? I also want to bring this distinction between offsets and removals, and this directly correlates to the future of the carbon market. Offsets have been used, offset is nothing but an avoided emission. You typically achieve that by undertaking an activity that will avoid emissions, which in the absence of the activity that you undertaken would have happened. And that is offset. And the offsets are typically used to meet carbon neutrality commitments. Now, removals have a different slightly different meaning. Removals are actually CO2 removed from the atmosphere, taken back. And it can be taken back using technologies. There are carbon capture technology, multiple and reuse technologies. Air capture and concentration and putting it away under the Earth's surface. There are natural processes. Everything that is stored in forests, in any ecosystem, whether it's oceanic ecosystem or terrestrial ecosystem, that's a removal. They absorb carbon from the atmosphere. So therefore, you can increase that stock of carbon by afforestation, by improving green cover. That's removal. And there are ways to estimate and quantify those removals. And land use, the topsoil contains organic carbon. And with continuous tilling and farming, you keep losing that organic carbon. And farming practices can be improved to gradually improve the soil carbon content and thereby actually sequestering a lot of carbon in the soil itself. That's also available methodology for removal. Can we move on, please? Now, actually, Ramanuj did talk about this, the different instruments and their fungibility. So I will not spend much time. As carbon itself, there is CER, which existed during the Kyoto Protocol. This came typically from project activities registered with UNFCCC. As per their protocol, they have methodologies, they have a process, and you get a CER. A CER is a certified emission reduction equivalent to 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. Similarly, VER, it doesn't go through the UN process. It's most of the other registries, when it's any registry other than UNFCCC, it's typically a VER. It's a voluntary emission reduction. That's also 1 ton CO2 equivalent. But even under VER, this follows a process. There's a scientific process underlying that. How you calculate, what is the process, whether it's a fuel switch, whether it's something else, how do you create that emission reduction? And it gets documented, verified, this elaborate process. And that is what you get, that authenticity, that's what you get when you go through this process. For the other instruments like ESERTs and REC, and IREC is international REC, they have an underlying CO2 attribute, but they don't really go through this process. And Ramanuj mentioned that, and therefore making them fungible, of course you can create a compliance market and throw this into the mix and make them equivalent. It could work in the voluntary market. It's very difficult. So next one, please. So now, what is the future looking like? So here I have just one big example, how the global carbon markets is going to flip on its head. Today, the market is dominated by offsets, which is, avoided emissions. But going forward, as you can see, of course, offset market is slowly grow, and then it's going to drop off because there's not going to be, it's not going to be really possible to keep generating quality offsets. The removals on the other side is going to grow and it's going to take over the market. One estimate shows we need nearly 3.5 billion tons every year, to be in line with 1.5 degree, warming pathway. And that's how much carbon we will have to remove. And therefore removals are going to take over the market. It's going to take time. We still don't have cheap technology to make that happen, but I think there's a lot of money going into that. So I'm going to stop it there, so we can hopefully take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bose.
Thank
I
you.
stopped sharing. Yeah, Roman, please.
Thank you, Ramanuj and Bose, for giving us an overview of the evolving carbon markets framework in India. We sincerely believe that development of an efficient carbon market framework in India will accelerate India's energy transition and also accelerate uptake of innovative deep decarbonization technologies. So we'll now move on to the Q&A session. As we can see, we have a wide variety of participants ranging across industrial sectors, typically consumers and also project developers. So now I would welcome the participants to share, to feel free to share their comments on the regulatory pieces which Bose and Ramanuj just covered, or any recommendations they would like to place on the forum. We'll have two ways. Either you can raise your hand, we'll unmute you to share your views, or you can type in your questions in the Q&A box. So yeah, I'll now open the session for Q&A. And with that, I'll call on Dibyajyoti Bhuyan from ExxonMobil to share his remarks.
Can you hear me, Bhuvan?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for this opportunity. And I also wanted to thank the presenters for giving an overview of the Indian carbon market. I just wanted to make a couple of points. The first point is that when we look at the carbon market framework, we do find two concerns. One concern the first speaker referred to, which is how do you create eventually an efficient cap and trade system, trying to build on a whole set of legacy schemes like PAT and REC. I don't think that globally anywhere a system like this exists where you are building upon existing schemes that were designed to deliver a different objective, and you are repurposing that for the purpose of carbon market. So I think as a team, as a group, we need to put a little bit of more thought about what alternate option can we suggest to BEE. For example, can we advocate that you only allow obligated parties to participate in the compliance market, maybe add the financial brokers, etc. So I think this is one part from a market design point of view. We need to give a little bit more thought. The second part is more about, there are a lot of technical areas where clarity doesn't exist. Maybe we can compile a set of questions on which we need further clarity. For example, I personally do not know if I refer to section 10 of annexure 2 of the document. This annexure outlines a bunch of sectoral intensity improvement targets by 2030. For thermal power generation, the improvement is listed as 1%, for steel by 22%, for refining by 28%. We don't know what is driving this differential intensity improvement targets. Why it is 1% for coal versus 22% for steel. Similarly, it's not very clear that how having different intensity targets for different kind of industries is going to contribute to the overall reduction of carbon intensity by 45%. Similarly, the policy is absolutely silent on which type of emissions are we talking about. I'm assuming that it's scope 1, but is it scope 1, scope 2, scope 3? So I believe that there are a bunch of open-ended technical questions on which clarity doesn't exist. So we as a group need to come up with our questions that can be compiled and further discussed with BEE for the clarity purpose. And then on the market design part, all of us would have some or other view, as I gave my view about the problem of building a fresh market on the basis of the legacy schemes. So I think we need to look at all these market design and technical open-ended questions and address them going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, TJ. We have noted the points and we'll definitely include them once we reach out to BEE in our position paper. I just asking Ramanuj and Bose if they would like to respond to the points which DJ just mentioned, just talked about.
No, so Bhuvan, absolutely valid and relevant points made by the Dibyajyoti, because building on legacy systems to sort of create a new carbon market, as I said, that's going to be challenging, both from market design perspective, compliance perspective, and enforcement perspective. And which are the entities you're going to include, which are going to be the obligated entities, in that design. So I think it's probably sort of time to take a pause and have a look at what market mechanism we are wanting to put in place, what is the objective that it is seeking to achieve, and how we are going to meet that objective. So it's important clearly that sort of have a proper thought on it. I don't think that there has been sufficient sort of debate and feedback and consultation with the industry before that blueprint was sort of released. So absolutely in agreement with him.
Yeah, I would just add to that. If you look at the discussion paper from the the entire patch scheme was owned and designed and implemented by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. So it's partly their own interest to make sure that ESERTs, this program gets rolled up into a potential carbon market. And I do see that's a big challenge because these are for a particular entity, this ESERTs, the underlying energy saving comes from probably a bunch of small and large initiatives, not really, amenable to a process like any of the registries run. So in the end, it may not go through that process. ESERTs may not get fungibility.
Thanks, Bose. Thanks, Ramanuj. So I'll now call on Srini Vishwanathan from Vibrant Energy Holdings for his remarks.
Yeah, hey, thank you very much to the CAM team. It's really interesting take. I mean, obviously, this is a very important development, and thanks for your insights. I have a couple of questions, and I don't know if we have the answers yet, but I think these are important challenges that we're seeing forward. For point number one, which relates to the assertion that the government wants to keep the credits within India for meeting the NDCs. That one of the things, though, is in terms of the voluntary market, which has both RECs and ESERTs and RECs. Now, one of the things that there are a lot of global companies in India who are using IREC as a business model to meet in-country compliances. Question number one is that likely to come under any purview of the government, or are they going to let those companies do what they are doing currently in terms of the IRECs, using IRECs to meet their in-country requirement? And then the second part of that is around the voluntary carbon market. Now, the voluntary carbon market will only pick up if there is strict compliance of the obligated entities and for any large corporate consumer to use carbon as an offset instead of IREC as an offset. I'm talking only in restriction to the large solar and wind projects, which typically go down and use REC as a method, not carbon as a method. So in that case, if somebody is building renewable energy projects and they're using REC as a mechanism or IREC as a mechanism, then there's going to be no liquidity in the voluntary carbon market in India for the Indian consumer who is taking these targets. And the second part question is around the standards of Gold and Vera. We have recently been told by Gold and Vera that they will not be registering any Indian projects. And so I don't know if you have any information or any update on that. That would be the third question, if you may help me. Thank you.
Maybe I can take, I'll start from the last one.
Sure.
So that, the Gold Standard and Vera, their stand is on renewable projects. Because the general stand, most of the large carbon exchanges across the world is that they will not consider renewables for additionality from any country other than the least developed countries. Because in most of the other countries, renewables have been established as a business as usual scenario. And if so I will not go into the details. The carbon credits were and that additional revenue were offered to renewables in the early stages when they were struggling to establish, and did get the benefit of that. Even in India, I think renewable energy sector really gained in its early stages from that. So now they don't want to give that. And so gold standard is registering, say, community-based projects. A lot of projects are getting registered here. But they will not register renewable energy projects. I think that's their stand. On the other two questions, I think, it's the challenge is we are calling it a voluntary market, right? So nobody really has especially government doesn't have a say in, if you impose something, then it becomes a compliance market. It loses its voluntary nature. So the voluntary market is driven by self-imposed regulations. How at the customer and at the client side, at the consuming end, the big corporations who are buying, how they evaluate these projects. Why would they buy IREX? I think that's a question. Who is looking at them and really saying that this is not right. So I just don't see a remedy other than someone to step in and make it a compliance sort of system. Under the voluntary market, it has to be governed by voluntary commitments and sort of self-imposed, qualifying criteria. So it's not an easy space that way.
Srini, just to clarify your questions, when you're saying you're using IREC to meet in-country commitments or obligations, so your in-country obligations, that is in terms of RPO you're talking about?
No, in terms of voluntary clients. So for example, a data center might say, and I did my scope 1 emission. As of now, I'm going to look at my scope 1 emission. And under my scope 1 emission, I need to get about X amount of credits, which translates to, let's say, a 10 megawatt project. And so they would look at it and say, I have a megawatt project and I've created this additionality, and I'm going to use IREC as a mechanism to put internally. Of course, IREC also has an in-country principle. So for in-country consumption and in-country, they have used IREC as a method of compliance. And obviously, IREC is a global body which has good solid verification procedures, and the client meets the requirements. Now, does this market creates this perfectly meets the minister's requirement of meeting the NDCs within the country? No, there's no conflict there. However, it shouldn't happen that what we're worried about is it's not you're forcing the customer to follow a certain market just for the sake of showing that you built a successful domestic voluntary market, which is not necessarily good for the space.
No, absolutely. And I think if we go by the current sort of the statements and what's come out in the blueprint and what was discussed, for example, in the parliament, the intent is not to sort of prohibit usage of other sort of globally acceptable instruments such as IREC to meet the voluntary commitments. So I think if we go by the sort of current thinking, probably IREX or IREC type of instruments should exist alongside ESOTs and RECs when they are rolled into, let's say, something equivalent of an Indian carbon credit. But of course, we will have to see the fine print of the regulations or the scheme when that sort of published.
Then on that note, I just should flag that there's one more discussion point that I've been listening here recently in forums where government, especially one of the discussions are also that with the the advent of a large green hydrogen program and a large, large green open access policy, things, that India can actually become a net exporter of carbon credits to meet the goals. I hear those conversations as well. And if that is the track you want to go down, then you want to make sure that the so India uses is valued as the same as a European carbon credit, not the $1, but the $10 that a European carbon credit that. So give us a parity for Indian carbon credit on par with a European carbon. So domestic, you've shunned your potential chances of being a net exporter of carbon credit and creating massive renewable energy projects in the country.
No, so I mean, though sort of some parts of your conversation was patchy, but I think what you're asking is that how does sort of India's current plans fit into the big export target and looking to exploit overseas markets such as Europe for exporting carbon credits. Now, unless sort of Indian carbon credit system, and that includes the exercise of validation, verification, monitoring, and the registry processes, unless these regulations and market architecture are consistent with what's being already implemented in, let's say, EU or some of the other overseas markets, it would be difficult for India to say that give us an equivalence treatment for Indian carbon credits and then allow Indian companies or renewable energy producers or green hydrogen producers to export the carbon credits to the EU market to meet sort of their own emission reduction commitments. So it will have to be a harmonization of the sort of market architecture and the regulatory standards and verification standards before they will be able to achieve an equivalence.
Okay, thank you very much.
I would just add to that because as I said, the RE itself, the renewable energy behind the green hydrogen is not likely to get the benefits of carbon credits. Now, green hydrogen itself, at the point of who is making green hydrogen, and that party could eventually, because it's still hasn't broken through the price barrier, it probably needs the support of a carbon market. But what kind of, it wouldn't make any sense if it commands the same price of $7-8 a ton. But unless it's part of a compliance market like the EU ETS, where the prices are close to 100 euros, it may not add the kind of financial muscle to investors to go for green hydrogen.
Thanks, Bose. Thanks, Ramanuj. Ramanuj, Bose, there are a few questions in the Q&A box. Can we take maybe a couple of questions?
Sure. So first is if I take this one from Sangeeta Dawar from Bayer, is the government contemplating stopping trading of carbon credits for VCM? What could be options for private investees? Answer is no. Government is not contemplating stopping of trading of carbon credits for VCM. The government is currently contemplating merging or sort of converting unutilized research and possibly even RSEs into carbon credits to essentially initiate supply in the voluntary carbon market. As I said, it's not sort of clear that whether other instruments would be excluded. My sense is that other instruments would also continue to exist alongside, so long as they are issued by or are verified by a globally acceptable registry. So I don't think they're thinking of stopping of trading of carbon credits or VCM. Second question is from Vinod Subramaniam from Salesforce. How can we participate and contribute to the Indian government's initiatives for to help accelerate India's journey to net zero? I think there are sort of plenty of options available that not necessarily relevant for this session, but of course one can look at reducing carbon emissions, scope 1, scope 2, buying more renewable energy.
From land management and price trajectory. The challenge, I think there are people willing to offer a good price to removals through land management. But the challenge with removals through land management is the lack of visibility of longevity. You do something today, you get, you have some farmers or somebody, with millions of hectares today under a program, and you're doing A, B, C, D, a few things, and you are actually able to show improving soil carbon, and you are able to estimate the delta and, offer some credits. But guess what? If 5 years down the line, if they change the practices, they drop off, all this carbon can come back to the atmosphere in a couple of years. So the longevity of the sequestration is a challenge. Until that is resolved, I think I don't see it really getting a premium price tag. But there's a lot of interest there though, because it can improve the income levels and livelihoods of farmers.
Ramanuj, Bose, since we are already past time, if we can just take maybe a couple of questions which might cater to the broader set of the participants. So, any views on credits generated by new age circular business models such as end of vehicle recycling? Any views on that?
Again, the challenge is, with any of that, there are two things that a potential serious customer would look at. One is the additionality of the credits. Two is the, as I said, the longevity. Is this through a process that will lock in that carbon for 25, 30 years, So, and then the scale, you could probably something really a small project where you have a good handler, but if it has to be part of the larger market, it has to be scalable as well. So some of them are still facing a lot of challenges with these three aspects.
Okay, Ramanuj, Bose, I think we can wrap up the session now because we are past the time. Any parting notes, any parting thoughts from you, and then I'll.
No, so I think, Bhuvan, amongst your members, sort of, there would be particular concern on, stopping of exports, and there were some questions around that as well. So I think, again, there is nothing in the legislation. There are some statements made by the, minister concerned in the parliament. possibly we are yet to see. There may be a rethinking on, whether there should be a ban on export, and especially when you're only looking to create a voluntary market and not a compliance market. In a voluntary market, it just doesn't make sense to ban any kind of export, because voluntary is just that it is voluntary. So the players should be able to utilize their credits or IREX or RDCs in the best possible manner, including utilizing it overseas. When a compliance market comes in, maybe there could be a basis to at least regulate, if not ban, the export of carbon credits until India is able to show substantial improvement in its path towards achieving NDCs.
I would just close by saying that there is a role for a carbon market in India, of course, across the world. We have some serious commitments in terms of our NDCs and our net zero. Therefore, there is a role. But the key is in designing a market where the demand is created and the supply sort of matches with it. And overall, at a country level, we keep moving the needle forward in terms of national emission reduction commitments and moving to net zero. And that's not an easy task. So the market has to be designed very thoughtfully.
Thank you, Ramanuj. Thank you, Bose, for a very engaging session. I would like to thank all the industry participants who took time to log in for the session. There were many questions, and because of paucity of time, we couldn't take any more questions, but we'll share the slides, the presentation with all the participants, and I'll also share the contact details of Ramanuj and Bose. So if there are any questions, you can obviously direct it to them. Also, we'll look to leverage the interaction today and we'll reach out to you requesting your comments, your observations on the carbon markets framework, and we'll try to prepare an industry position paper through which we'll reach out to BEE MOP. We plan to reach out to BEE MOP to schedule future consultations on where the industry inputs can feed into the development of the carbon market in India. So with that, I thank you all again for joining in, and hope you all stay safe, and looking forward to meeting you in next consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhuvan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.